right, everyone, let's go ahead and get started. For those of you just joining us, welcome. Our webinar, Healthcare Asset Monitoring at Scale using BLE, is about to begin. Our speakers today are Paul Della Villa, Business Segment Manager at Onset, and Kevin Tate, Chief Revenue Officer here at Regato. First up is Kevin.
Thanks, Christy. Just want to make sure everyone can see my screen. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you just fine.
Okay, perfect. Good. This is Kevin Tate from Regato, and delighted today to have Paul Della Villa with us from our partner Onset. Please do submit questions via WebEx as we go. We should have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. And first, I'm going to talk a little bit about Regato, what we do and the types of infrastructure that we provide for IoT data solutions. And then leave the lion's share of the time for Paul to talk about Onset solutions for healthcare monitoring applications. So what we do here at Regato, we provide primarily Bluetooth low energy solutions for IoT use cases like smart logistics, connected hospitality, smart office, and healthcare. We've been doing that for, over 9 years now. Our primary solution is the Cascade Edge as a Service gateway. You see a picture of that here. The gateway provides the connectivity between beacons or devices. It provides edge computing for the data and control of those devices, and then it integrates with our customers' cloud services. And so that's what you'll see today, is how Onset is using our gateway to connect with their cloud services and applications. We work with a lot of different partners. Those partners range from device to cloud to systems integration and monitoring partners. And we're lucky to be working with more than 300 global customers all over the world. Last count, we had about 5 million devices deployed in over 30,000 locations. In terms of how the Regato solution works, the Cascade Edge as a Service solution includes both the gateways as well as a management platform for secure updating and device management at scale. So typically what people are doing with our Regato gateways is they're connecting their sensors and devices, and those might be to sensors or tracking tags or even users' mobile phones. A lot of times smart lighting and building control devices are in play. They're using that gateway to connect upstream to a cloud service to deliver data. We have pre-built integrations with partners like Azure IoT and Amazon AWS. We can also integrate with any customer's cloud via MQTT or HTTP. And perhaps most importantly, the ability to scale and manage those gateways securely. So our gateways typically end up in hundreds or thousands of locations spread all over the place, in transit or in a commercial office space or in a warehouse. And being able to keep those secure and updated over the life of the infrastructure and the application is a big part of the value we provide here at Regato. In terms of how our customers and partners use it, 3 very common use cases for Regato are asset tracking, control and automation, and sensing and monitoring, which are often places where Bluetooth is being used, especially Bluetooth low energy is being used in commercial IoT applications today. To dive a little bit more into the types of things that customers do and the role we play, a close partner of ours is Radius Networks, who provides location-based experiences for restaurants and retail. In that case, for something like their table service delivery, our gateways are tracking all the beacons in the restaurant, knowing where people sat down so that food can be delivered as soon as it's ready. And we're communicating in that case with our Radius Network beacons who have the table tents on each table. And all that goes up to the cloud service provided by Radius. So there, the gateways are really the glue around the locationing for beacons inside a restaurant space. Pretty different example would be with our partner CBRE. So CBRE provides a host CBRE 360 Smart Office solution. And in that case, we have occupancy sensors that we provide that give real-time information to the gateways about which conference rooms are available, so that those can be scheduled via Outlook or released if they were scheduled and no one actually showed up for the meeting. In that case, we're providing both the gateways and the sensors, and we're integrating with Azure Digital Twins in the back end. And what Onset's going to talk about today is closer to our cold chain monitoring solutions. So here, Regado gateways, again, provide that connectivity and computing glue between, in this case, Onset's in-temp BLE sensors, which Paul will talk about how those provide vaccine compliance and safety. Regado gateways gather information from those sensors throughout transit, and then we store and forward that information to the in-temp system in the cloud, a vaccine monitoring system by Onset. So that's the role we typically play, and we play that role of connectivity and computing across a pretty wide range of partner and customer ecosystems. A lot of times we're integrating with devices and sensors kind of on the bottom end, cloud and IoT platforms on the top end, and working with systems integration and deployment partners to do things like fulfillment, installation, and tracking. And we take we call Edge as a service model to our offering, meaning that we are able to offer the gateway and the management services, and in some cases, even the sensors and devices, all as a part of a monthly subscription, making it easier for customers to sign up and then grow as their applications scale. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul to talk more specifically about what Onset is up to. And let me see if I can give Paul.
Hey, Kevin. So if everybody can hear me right now, I'm pulling up the front of my slide deck, and I should be sharing.
Looks like it's coming up, Paul.
Excellent.
All right. Very good. Take it away, Paul.
I think everybody can hear me now, unless there's an issue that unbeknownst to me. So,
nope, sounds good.
I'm going to talk a little bit about is how some of these edge and IoT technologies help us in this healthcare asset monitoring space. And when we talk about monitoring in healthcare, there are a number of different ways you can look at it, and I know there are other people who are looking at asset tracking, whether that's physical location of equipment or people. What we at Onset do are really look at the temperature monitoring side of things. So for us, the question that's always asked is, why are we doing this? And there are a number of reasons. We're traditionally providing monitoring services, whether in clinics, hospitals, or throughout the pharmaceutical supply chain for vaccines and biologics, traditional OTC drugs, or even some of the newer, more selective cell gene therapies that are out there where you have very stringent temperature ranges that affect how well drugs work. We help to look at things like the effect of freezing on products. It's something that people don't always think about, but when you talk about some of these biologics, freezing can actually have a devastating effect on products, to making them, in some cases, unusable. And, when you look at what our customers are doing, whether they're actually creating the pharmaceutical drugs in the manufacturing plant or using them, we're seeing more and more drugs in the pipeline that are temperature sensitive. So when we look at creating solutions to try to help our customers, we try to take that in mind. And in doing so, the keys for us are really looking at efficacy, so how well these drugs work and how temperature impacts that. And then, of course, the most important thing is the safety of patients. So when you're looking at healthcare and monitoring temperatures in those spaces, those two are really kind of the key things that we're looking at. Within this space of monitoring, there's been somewhat of an evolution over the last 10 years of how people are monitoring temperatures, specifically in the pharmacy space. It started with what I'll call back in the day, where people would have anything from a standard mercury thermometer to a small little digital temperature thermometer that told you what the current temperature was, and that's it. There were some regulations that focused on the manufacturing side, but when you got into places like your neighborhood pharmacy, retail shops that hold medicines, or even pharmacies and hospitals or other places, there wasn't a whole lot of regulation or driver to monitor or look at this at all. So what you started seeing is this evolution of regulations where boards of pharmacies, the CDC, WHO, FDA, and a whole other host of other regulatory bodies started to tell these pharmacies, started to tell these small doctors' offices, hey, if you're going to keep drugs here, you need to make sure they're kept safely. You need to make sure they're not kept in a small cooler where you're either over freezing or getting them too warm. You have to start to actually pay attention to this. And this presented a whole slew of problems because, one, there weren't a ton of vendors out there that helped with this. And two, I think that one of the biggest issues across the board is doctors' offices and nurses, those people who were working there, they were excellent at taking care of patients. None of them were experts on temperature monitoring or how it affected pharmaceuticals. So when we talk about all these groups that were affected by that, none of them had expertise in these types of fields. So as we move on to kind of this current marketplace we're in, we're seeing a move to more dedicated types of systems, refrigerators, and these temperature monitoring systems that not only monitor things accurately and help keep patients safe, but also are designed in a way that aren't taking away time and effort and energy from the actual people who are supposed to be helping patients. So what we're going to talk a little bit about today is a case study where we actually implemented our solution across a number of pharmacies throughout the United States, and how the impact of kind of these new IoT and edge solutions can not only make compliance easier, but also make it easier for the individuals on site. So the first thing that we talk about with any customer, anybody who's in these types of pharmacy chains or hospitals is, why would you look to implement these types of solutions? And the three main issues that we talk about are centralized control. So understanding what these systems are, making sure that a pharmacy chain in Oregon has the same type of solution, the same robustness as a pharmacy chain in Missouri or Wisconsin or on the East Coast in the Northeast where we're located. You want to make sure that you understand risk. Is there risk to, you as a business because you're holding vaccines and you don't want to lose those because they go bad? What's the risk if they do go bad and they accidentally are given to a patient? All of those things have to go into, the approach to looking at why we need these types of solutions. And then, of course, you need to make sure whatever solution, whatever technology you put in, it meets and exceeds national standards. For us, that's, as I mentioned before, CDC, boards of pharmacies, FDA in some cases. And those standards are of everything to do how we monitor, also up to some of the things that Legato helps with, which is the security aspects of things. So the second thing that we talk about when we look at kind of these large national pharmacy chains is we as a solution provider talk to our customers about the different areas they need to evaluate when looking at monitoring temperature at sites using some of these newer technologies. And some of the areas that we really look at are ease of deployment. And this, I think, is probably the biggest selling point, one of the biggest reasons that we're, one, picking Bluetooth as a technology, and two, working with an organization like Legato. These types of technologies need to be easy to set up. They need to be something that is as close to plug and play as possible, doesn't require the cost of having somebody go on and install temperature sensors or hardware solutions. They should be familiar technology. In the case of how we approach temperature monitoring, we use Bluetooth data loggers, we use a Bluetooth gateway, and we manage that either through the gateway in our cloud solution or through a mobile application on a phone, which is a very familiar piece of technology to individuals, whether you're a nurse, an office administrator, an IT individual at a hospital. That familiarity and technology makes the system, one, a little bit easier to deploy, and two, helps the individuals who have to use it feel more comfortable with it. And that's one of the keys that we ran into. Security is obviously a plus with all of this. You need to make sure that the information you're getting is secure, it meets data integrity standards, and you don't have any risk of impacting other systems. And we look at wireless as being one of the keys there as well with Bluetooth technology, because when you start to implement in places where they have stringent security protocols, hospitals being one of them, clinics, pharmacies, pharmaceutical manufacturing plants, the ability to install things without having to run new wire, engage with facilities crews, make all of these a much easier install process in general. Of course, we want to take into account the cost of that. If we're the most expensive solution provider out there, we're probably not going to put a lot of business in there. We want to make sure that we're using technologies that are reasonably low cost. They're scalable based on site size, so we're looking at reasonable price regardless of the size of the site. We've installed at sites that use one gateway and a couple of data loggers up to large hospitals that are using a large number of both. And while Rigado looks at specifically using some of these software as a service system, we at Onset translate that into a somewhat upfront cost that allow our customers to have a no recurring subscription over a period of time. That makes it easier for them to look at it as a capital investment over a number of years rather than a recurring subscription. Both models work depending on the customer base you're working with. We found that specifically for the pharmacy chain, this was one of the things that helped them. We also look at how these solutions can help operational efficiencies, helping notify the right people at the right time if there are issues using those Bluetooth gateways as an edge device. We look at time to set up versus again, what I mentioned, those more archaic hardwired systems that are in there. We look at the operational efficiencies of dealing with calibrations and some of the technical things and the sensors we're working with. And then, of course, like with any software as a service, the ability to put together easy reports and audit compliance are, of course, key to some of our customers and one of the things that we talk about. And finally, one of the nice things and one of the reasons I think we're able to take technology like Rigado and reach out to our specific market. Any solution provider that's selling to the space needs to have knowledge. They need to have an understanding of what the impacts are, how system and setup and management impacts local regulations, impacts the operations of those different clinics and pharmacies, and then how best to implement those in a way that doesn't completely break down the operational structures that are currently in place. So to wit, a bit about our service and our technology. The solution that we use is called the intent monitoring solution. The case study that we're talking about here is really the deployment across our hospital and clinical space, but we also offer a solution with the pharmaceutical supply chain. And as Kevin mentioned, our devices are really data logging devices. They're designed to monitor with probes or the devices themselves temperature in these supply chains. And unlike perhaps maybe a traditional asset tracking technology that's using just a beaconing technology with a gateway, one of the things that we're able to do with the Rigado technology is not only identify where our loggers are with the Bluetooth connectivity, but also connect to those, manage those, and get all of our data off them in a secure way and up to the cloud, so we can manage that temperature data in a holistic, secure way. So if there's ever a question of whether drugs are good, whether the products that are being stored in these refrigerators are applicable, we have the entire view of that top to bottom. And that's really enabled with our data loggers, which is something we've worked on for a very long time, and then the connectivity piece, which was enabled by the gateway. So for us, and again, when we're talking about this solution with our customers, the last step after evaluation is how we technically roll that out to our customer space. And one of the things that we talk about, I talked about earlier, is really that flexibility in how we set these systems up. We have pharmacy chains. The pharmacy chain we're talking about here has pharmacies that vary in size across the entire United States. They have some larger pharmacies in major metropolitan areas that have a number of fridges that are doing high volume drug distribution, so they're able to leverage a number of data loggers with a single gateway. We have some that are very small, and then some are in the medium range. One of the advantages of using these gateways as a technology is that you don't need costly infrastructure on each logger or each device that's monitoring. You can use that central hub to monitor the entire system without adding extra infrastructure cost. So, for our specific rollout, we looked at a number of pharmacy chains of roughly about 500 pharmacies across the entire United States, and we ran about a 6-month deployment for that. The first 25% of that was really setup, and that's understanding our customers' needs, understanding how they, setting up deployment schedules, creating training materials, and actually procuring all of the hardware to put out in these spaces. The bulk of these deployments are actually the rollout themselves. And what we end up looking at, especially for these large pharmacies chains, are regional rollouts. We pick a region, we roll it out. For this specific case, we started with our Southeast region. We rolled that out, we reviewed and adjusted the process, and we continued the regional rollout through the rest of the sites. What that really allowed us to do is create good customer feedback, get one group familiar with our technology, which went pretty well, and then help drive that throughout the rest of the pharmacy chain. And of course, the final thing with any deployment, the last 10% of course, error handling and system adjustment. And that's really where working with a partner like Rigato and leveraging our cloud infrastructure and their technology really allowed us to make fine-tune adjustments remotely at these sites and really help to get the system up and running to peak performance at the end without the need to be on site at each of these locations and centrally manage information across a large number of pharmacies from one specific site. So we have a lot of key success factors, and they vary for different industries, but the biggest one for us is the regulatory compliance. State boards of pharmacy and the CDC really drive how pharmacies and hospitals have to monitor. And then groups like the FDA also dictate how that data has to be stored and what types of information, how that information needs to be handled. So you're really looking at, from a key success factor, understanding the regulatory compliance around the temperature and also the security, which is the entire infrastructure from our loggers through the gateway up through the cloud. The technology is, of course, another great factor. The easy-to-use software, Bluetooth familiarity, and plug-and-play hardware solutions make all of these things better. As I mentioned before, one of the biggest things that we talk about with our customer base in these clinics and hospitals is that nurses want to be helping patients. And any technology that we put in any of these locations really needs to help them do that by not taking away their time, which is probably about the most precious resource they have. You need to have a knowledge of the actual industry. A lot of people can bring out technology. Being able to apply that technology to specific industries and doing it in an intelligent, helpful way requires understanding of that. Focuses on quality and focuses on partnering with customers and vendors rather than dropping something in and walking away. Finally, and this is just something that, something that we tout here at Onset, but I know for a fact that Rigato shares because we've worked with them for a long time. Teamwork and organizational buy-in are things that are needed across the board for this. Explaining to people why we're monitoring the temperature and the impact to patients, and how these solutions can not only help that, but help make nurses and doctors' lives easier. Those types of things can make these successful technology rollouts go absolutely fantastically. So the last thing here, and I powered through that pretty quickly, but the last thing that we have here is a bit about Onset. We're a leader in data logging solutions. We've been around since 1981. We're based in the Cape Cod area of the United States, and we do all of our design, manufacturing, and production right here at our system here, at our site here. So partnering with Rigato, who is, I know, out on the West Coast, we have nice view of the United States. We also operate in Europe, but we're able to provide a very nice solution to our customers that allow leveraging these edge technologies to help make their lives easier. So that's a bit about what we do at Onset. Kevin, I guess we'll let you jump back in from your end if there are any other comments or questions there.
Thanks, Paul. That was great, Paul. Really appreciate it. I do have some questions that have come in here. Those of you who might have questions to submit, the Q&A function on WebEx should let you submit those. But starting with the ones we have so far, this one's about compliance and regulations. And you ended up talking about this a little bit after it came in, but it says, which of the regulations are most important for solution providers to keep in mind for pharma logistics? So maybe, Paul, there's specific aspects to the things you mentioned, data storage and collection and so on, that are top of mind?
Sure. There are two specific things when you're looking at this for pharmaceutical storage and logistics. The first are what we call good distribution practices. Both the U.S. and the EMA, the European Medicines Agencies, have regulations on how you need to store, handle, and transport pharmaceutical product. When you get to more site information, the CDC and the boards of pharmacy have some additional ones. Those regulations are really important from how your solution works to meet those. Additionally, because you're managing data, and this data is often used to support the use of pharmaceutical products, you also have to take into account FDA regulations on data integrity. And the biggest one that we talk about is 21 CFR Part 11, which is a data integrity compliance from the FDA. So our solution not only meets the temperature monitoring side of things, which are good distribution practices, but also the data integrity part. And both of those go hand in hand. You really can't have one without the other.
Gotcha. Thank you. Next one is about connectivity. How are the gateways connecting to the internet to send data to the cloud?
So the devices that we use from our gateways are either Ethernet enabled or Wi-Fi enabled. So for the devices we have launched out for our Intemp system, we are either having people connected over a DHCP Ethernet connection or configuring them to the Wi-Fi of the site that they're using.
Got it. Okay, thank you. The next one goes back to your timeline slide. It says, timeline included some adjustments and improvements. What were some lessons learned from initial deployments? So
a couple of the key features, and I will apologize, I'm not going to go into the actual minute details because I don't want to share all of our customer stories, but two of the things that we got feedback from that first region were the actual instructions on deployment. So we made some specific changes to the documentation and some of the instructions for sites 2 through 6. And the other thing, which was really gateway enabled, is allowed us to make small adjustments to the temperature ranges and the alarm limits on the data loggers themselves that allowed the sites to be a little bit more compliant to their individual boards of pharmacies. We came out with some global or some national guidelines based on the CDC, and we found that, for instance, after there was an audit in the Northwest region, that there was a specific requirement that needed a little bit of adjustment, and they were able to manage that centrally without having to deal with anything on site or burden the actual site staff.
Perfect. Thank you. Lots more questions pouring in here. One is, did the devices have to be FDA approved?
No, these aren't medical devices. It doesn't go through a full medical device approval. They just need to meet the guidelines that are put out for monitoring. If we were talking about, for instance, like a wearable for something that was monitoring blood pressure or some of these EKG solutions they have out, those are medical devices. The monitoring solutions are not. They just need to comply and help organizations meet some of the other requirements that you have out for those requirements I mentioned earlier.
Perfect. Thank you. And that covers a a couple that came in around FDA certification. Next one, this looks like one I can answer. How does Rigato secure the Bluetooth connection between edge device, gateway, and back to the back end? So there's really three pieces to that. The first is all the Bluetooth connectivity between the end device, which in this case is the thermometer, and the gateway. All that is a secure paired connection that so nothing can be snipped between the device and the gateway. The gateway itself is kept secure and encrypted, so nothing can be pulled from the gateway either at rest or from RAM. And then all the information flowing from the gateway to the cloud is, I think, via encrypted HTTPS. Or are you guys using MQTT, Paul? Do you know?
No, you had it right the first time.
Okay.
It's the encrypted HTTPS.
Got it. And that's a great question, because making sure every sort of link in that chain is secure and encrypted, both during transmission and at rest, is super important, especially for this type of application. Another question, how frequently is data sent up to the cloud? Do you know, Paul?
Yeah, I do. Actually, it's customizable depending on our users. We have some users who are connecting and pulling information, basically skimming advertisement packets quite quickly and getting information up. We have others who don't only pull information up daily or weekly or in the event of an alarm. And for us, that's really the key there. We have a lot of our customers who they don't really care about the temperature data unless there's an issue. So the technology that we've enabled on our cloud and through the gateways and loggers is to have real-time alerting and alarming if there's an issue with a refrigerator.
Got it. Thank you. A couple of more questions about BLE. Let me put some of these together. So folks were asking about BLE version, range, and consistency. From the Rigato perspective, I can say that typically Bluetooth 4.2 or 5.0 is protocol we're using. Rigato has both modules, and our gateways use a Bluetooth 5.0. We often talk about range indoors, and when you're going through walls of, say, 50 meters, that's not nearly as much as you would get outdoor line of sight, where we see 100 meters plus, even before getting into the long range with Bluetooth 5. But I wonder if you could speak to some of the connectivity range that you see, Paul, going through this equipment and in this environment.
Yeah, that's right about what we've seen. It does depend a little bit on the application. We do work with customers that are actually monitoring pharmaceutical products in the supply chain, where they're putting our temperature loggers inside of, for instance, a VIP package, a vacuum insulated package. Our ranges go down there, obviously, because it's not line of sight, but in a traditional hospital or clinic, we're seeing that 30 to 50 meters, depending on layout and things that are in the actual space. One of the things that we do have is the ability to have our systems and our gateways, though, work intelligently together. So what we have is, depending on the space and what people are using for some of our larger applications, we have some guidance on the best way to set up the gateways and the loggers in a way that's a robust network.
Perfect. Thank you. Clarifying question came in about the relationship between the logger and the gateway, and kind of whether or not those were the same thing. Paul, can you talk about the temperature logger and what it is and does versus the role of the gateway?
Sure. So our temperature loggers are standalone devices themselves. So it's a Bluetooth data logger. It's a validated device. We've designed them to work by themselves with a mobile application on the phone. What the gateway gives us is the ability to connect those automatically to the cloud without the intervention of individuals on site. So once the gateway is up, once the loggers are up and running, you have real-time connectivity with our cloud. You have the ability to automate those alerts and information. And, of course, you have a secure way of pulling your data up into a secure storage location to run analytics, reports, and other data analysis as you need. So we see the gateway as a device that helps enable us to get information to where it needs to go at the right time and in a secure way.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, thanks very much for all the questions, and thanks for answering the lion's share of them, Paul. Really appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Christy for wrap-up and logistics.
All right. Thanks again to Paul and Kevin for being our presenters today, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. After leaving today, if you do have any remaining questions, you can reach us by email here at Regado at contact@regado.com or through our contact form over at the website, regado.com. As a reminder, you will receive a follow-up email in the next few days with a link to view a recording of today's presentation on demand. So, on behalf of Regado and our presenters, thank you so very much for joining us today. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.